I'm preparing a homily, I usually look at the first reading in the gospel because there's usually, if not always, a theme, a common theme between them. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to find. This one today I had to do a little thinking about and praying about, but I came up with the theme of God's generosity. So let's see how that theme plays out in the readings for today. The first reading from Isaiah was written during a difficult time for Israel. Over the last 200 years, they had been invaded twice. Many of the people were killed and taken off into captivity, into exile, where they were treated as slaves. Some went to the northern part of the land, to Assyria, and others went into Babylon. And it was a difficult time. Now, truth be told, the Israelites had not kept God's commandments very well, had indulged in idolatry and all kinds of immorality, and the prophets before Isaiah had warned them that something bad was going to happen. Well, it had happened. They were undergoing a time of sorrow and grief and hardship. The temple had been destroyed. There was no temple for them. Many of them fell away from the faith and started worshiping the pagan gods, and the future did not look very good. The neighboring countries thought that Israel had been wiped out. They were basically dispersed as a people. But Isaiah says to them, don't worry what people think. They might call you forsaken by God. They might say that the land is desolate. But God is going to raise you to new heights. And he proclaims God's love for them in terms that we might be able to relate to. Although on God's level, of course, it's much greater beyond what we can imagine. But he talks about God loving the people of Israel as a husband loves his wife, and as a wife loves her husband with this self-giving love, giving yourself totally to the other, no holding back. God in his generosity and loving kindness is bringing the Israelites back to life again, forgiving their sins, giving them a new start, getting rid of all that despair that had overtaken them, making them royalty, giving them a crown and a diadem. And he gives them a new name as well. They're now going to be called espoused, the spouse of the Lord, and my delight, because he takes great delight in them. And he vindicates them. He says, yes, you are the people that I chose, and the people surrounding you will know that. You have your mission back again, to bring my light, my forgiveness, my glory, my promise to the whole world. So here we are, thousands of years later. How do we relate to this message of God's generosity and goodness? When have you and I been astonished that God gave us much more than we had asked? Maybe at one time you tried to get a job and you didn't get that job, but then you got one that was much better. Maybe there was a time in your life when you went through some confusion, didn't know what to do, where to go. Perhaps you were caught up in some bad habit and didn't see any way out. But someone came into your life, maybe a book showed up that you needed to read, or a person that you needed to meet, and somehow you saw the way out. Somebody had faith in you. And we should give God the credit for that. In his generosity, he provides for us, shows us a way out of our darkness. And he delights in us. I'm going to tell you a story that some people know, but perhaps you haven't heard this. Some years ago, when my family was young, we had 3 children. And I thought everything was fine. My wife, though, wanted a bigger family. And she eventually won me around to her way of thinking. But then, to our surprise, she couldn't get pregnant. And we went through testing and found that she had endometriosis, which had scarred up her tubes, and everything was blocked up. So we tried surgery, we tried medicine, and then we tried adoption, and none of it worked. And then we had an opportunity to go to Lourdes with a group of pilgrims. She bathed in the waters there, had an amazing experience which she couldn't even talk about for several hours. It was so profound. And then the following fall, our daughter Amy was born. And we were so happy and grateful to God, but his generosity was going to continue for us. And over the next 6 years, we had 2 more children. And now the Benjamin family has 32 members. But God certainly was generous to us. And we've always been grateful, and we've always told people about it. And then we move on to the gospel for today, this beautiful story of Mary and Jesus and their relationship and the intervention with Jesus to turn 150 gallons of water into 150 gallons of delicious wine. And if you do the math, it comes out to almost 800 bottles of wine. I mean, is that a generous wedding gift or what? So that wedding party was not going to end prematurely, and that bridal family was not going to be embarrassed at all. I have one more little story about God's generosity in my life. When I finished my medical training, it was during the Vietnam War, and I expected I would be serving as a flight officer in the South China Sea, because I had been in the Navy as a medical student. But when the time came, they told me, oh no, we don't need you, we have enough doctors. So then it was getting close to the end of my training, and the question was, what was I going to do next? I didn't have a plan. So I prayed for God to show me this next step. And it wasn't long before my uncle, my only uncle, who lived in Bethesda, called me and said, have you heard about this new town called Columbia? And it was new at that time. I think Wild Lake was the only village that was in existence. So the following weekend, my wife and I traveled down here. We took the big tour, and we loved it so much we put down a down payment on a lot. The only trouble was I didn't have a job. But then through the Lord's generosity, I was able to get a postdoctoral fellowship at Hopkins, and then after that was done, came out here and been here ever since. So what I'd asked for was just, Lord, show me the next step. And he gave me a blueprint for the next 50 years. Talk about going above and beyond. Huh? So I invite you to take time today or this week and reflect on how God has been generous in your life. When has he gone above and beyond what you asked for? When has he provided a solution for what seemed to be an insoluble problem? And maybe you're going through a difficult time right now and you don't see the way out. But I would suspect that in the past you have had examples of God's generosity, and he will come through for you again. So let's praise and thank our good Lord for his generous gifts to us, for his blessings, and for the way he takes delight in you and in me.